Hello everyone, welcome to the Battle for Azeroth beta. Today I am trying out the Unholy Death Knight. And of course they are described as a master of death and decay, spreading infection and controlling undead minions to do his bidding, using two-handed weapons. Now of course these 6 abilities here kind of represent the core aspect of the class to give you a good idea of what they can do. Starting off with Festering Strike. Does a good amount of damage, and it applies 2 to 3 festering wounds, which when the target dies or when you use Scourge Strike, the wound will explode or burst and do a lot of shadow damage and generate some runic power for you. And of course you use your Scourge Strike to burst those wounds, and there's a talent point which replaces this ability for a slightly better ability that does the same exact thing. Outbreak, which is your disease. You want to apply this to all your targets. And of course, I have a talent set up to where when this deals damage, can explode and hit all the enemies around you. For AoE damage, we have Death Coil, which is a ranged shadow damage attack, and reduces the cooldown of Dark Transformation, which simply makes your ghoul into an undead powerful monstrosity, as you can see here. He took off his own arm to scratch his back. We also have Raised Dead, which is what summons your minion, and Army of the Dead, which summons a legion of ghouls who will attack your enemies for 30 seconds. So those are kind of the main abilities. So now I'm going to show you the basic rotation for Unholy Death Knight. You want to open with your Outbreak ability, use your Festering Strike, which will then of course cause a target to have some festering wounds, and then you use your Scourge Strike or your Clawing Shadows ability to burst those festering wounds and deal some damage. That is the most basic rotation right there. Of course, we have a whole bunch of other abilities on our action bar. Most of them, just like any other class, are your defensive, offensive cooldowns, your stuns, your silences, and stuff like that, of course. But I also have some other abilities which are essential to the rotation, but they're more kind of like utility. So of course, like Dark Transformation, like I said, your Death Grip, which pulls your target towards you. Death Strike will heal you up. Defile is your AoE ability, and Unholy Frenzy is a buff from the talent tree. So now here we are in the talent tree, 56 to level 100. So for our first tier, the level 56, we have Infected Claws. Your ghoul has a 30% chance to apply a festering wound on the target. All will serve. You raise Dead spell also summons an additional minion, and Clawing Shadows will replace your Scourge Strike, but it's really similar to Scourge Strike in the sense that it will also burst 1 festering wound. But the only main difference there would be is for Scourge Strike, if I show you the description here, it kind of does half physical damage and the other half shadow damage, while the Clawing Shadows ability just does all shadow damage and it does slightly more. So our 56 talents were all damage increasing talents. Our level 57 talents, Bursting Sores, your festering wounds deal 25% more damage, and all enemies within 8 yards will suffer from the shadow damage. Ebon Fever, your plague deals 15% more damage over time and half the duration. Unholy Blight is like an AoE ability on you. So level 57 and 56 are all damage increasing talents. Level 58, Grip of the Dead. Defile reduces the movement speed of enemies by 90%, decaying every 10% every second. Death Reach increases the range of Death Grip and killing an opponent resets the cooldown. Asphyxiate is a stun for 4 seconds. So there's your 58 talents. And then we have our level 60 talents, starting off with Pestilent Pustules. Bursting a festering wound has a 10% chance to grant you Runic Corruption. Runic Corruption, basically what it does is each runic power you spend has a 1.4% chance to increase your rune regeneration rate by 100% for 3 seconds. And the mastery increases the damage of your shadow damage by a certain percentage. Harbinger of Doom, Sudden Doom, triggers 15% more often, can accumulate 2 charges. Basically your auto attacks make your next Death Coil costs nothing. Soul Reaper, ability that increases your haste, so these two increase your haste, and then this one gives you more Sudden Doom proc. So basically level 60 is focused on increasing your damage. Now level 75, Spell Eater, anti-magic shield, absorbs more magic damage and lasts longer. Wraith Walk increases your movement speed and breaks you from any root effects. Death Pack is a way to heal yourself up. So level 75 is focused on defensive talents. Level 90, Pestilence, Death and Decay has a 10% chance to apply a festering wound to the enemy. We got our Defile, which replaces our Death and Decay, as you'll see here. And what it does is allows you to have your Clawing Shadows hit all enemies near the target while you are within the Defile. Like I said, replaces your Death and Decay, and your Clawing Shadows will hit everyone next to the target when you're inside your Defile. Then we have our next one, Epidemic, just a way to make your plague damage kind of explode all at once at a cost of 30 runic power. So level 90 is again focused on increasing your damage. Level 100, Army of the Damned, Death Coil reduces the cooldown of Apocalypse by 1 second and Army of the Dead by 5. And I didn't show you what Apocalypse is, forgot to show you that. What it does is for each festering wound, up to 4, that you burst will summon Army of the Dead equal to the amount of wounds that you burst. So 4 of them, of course. So kind of a second Army of the Dead. Got our Unholy Frenzy, which is your haste buff, and summon Gargoyle, which will summon a gargoyle that does damage for you. So again, level 100 also increases your damage. So here we are out in the field again. You want to open up with your Outbreak. Use your Festering Strike to cause those wounds. And then use your Scourge Strike or your Clawing Shadows to burst those wounds to do a lot of damage. And that is kind of the focus of the rotation for the Unholy Death Knight. And of course you have your Death Strike to heal you up after you defeat a target. So again, Outbreak, Festering Strike, and then your Clawing Shadows or Scourge Strike to pop those wounds. And pretty fun to play actually, you know, it can do some great damage, especially if you pull off some nice combos with the explosion of these wounds here. So here's the Defile, and when I use Clawing Shadows, every target gets hit by the Clawing Shadows ability, which gives you a nice amount of damage, like AoE damage on top of AoE damage, you know, it's a nice blend. And of course you have all your diseases, which is nice to spread among your enemies to do a lot of damage. As you saw there, that is once again the rotation. So one more, why not? Of course you want to open up with your Outbreak, you want to cause those wounds on the target, and then you want to burst those wounds to do some pretty good damage. And of course when Death Coil procs, you want to use that when you have the chance. So here's Whiplash, a pretty powerful opponent. That'll show you how the Unholy Death Knight performs in a long-term situation battle here. Here's the Apocalypse ability. I bursted the 4 wounds, and here are 4 more ghouls. And then after that, you just reapply some more wounds on the target and follow the rotation like normal. But this time I'm going to pop some cooldowns. You know, I made my ghoul much more powerful. It lasts, I think, 10 seconds. I also use the Defile just for more AoE damage, and there's a proc as you see there for the Death Coil. And also use my Haste cooldown, which came from the last perk of the talent tree for the level 100 tier. And so far I think the Unholy Death Knight is pretty fun to play, pretty cool to manage the diseases and pop the festering wounds. But like you see here, long-term battle, it can suffer from a lack of runes and runic power. You just have to find out how to manage that efficiently. But anyways, thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed this, sub to my channel, and I'll see you in the next one.